Thanks for coming out on Friday. I never thought, poetry would be, the kind of Friday night event that everybody's lining up for. It just doesn't. And I know there's a couple dudes here tonight that are like, fuck. It's just gonna be over. I know, you're trapped in a poetry reading, it's okay. You know those moments where you're about to do something really important and then it's too late, there's a point of no return where it's like now you just have to go through with it, now you have to do it, but you realize, yep, totally should have peed first. That's where we are. So if you see me starting to do this, it's not because I'm an awesome dancer. Wow, I'm astonished. Thank you all so much for coming out. You're welcome. I'm gonna start the show by suggesting the people at the back there just find a seat anywhere. Okay, all right. Hello.
Hello.
Starting shows is always weird because you're like, what the fuck do you say? I thought I'd start the evening. One of the things that I just released that I'm really actually quite proud of is I put out a graphic novel of one of my favorite pieces. I tell this story a lot because it means a great deal to me. I lost my granddad some years ago, and it was difficult. We didn't always have the easiest relationship. Growing up, my granddad was just a very angry person. He was one of 6 children that grew up in Austria, and his parents could afford to get one of them out during the war. And it ended up being him. And I think that's what made him very overbearing on our family. So we were left to deal with a lot of his anger issues. And that made dealing with him or communicating with him very difficult because you always had this sense of fear that he was going to be, no matter what it was, he was just going to lose his temper about it. And it could have been something very simple. I don't want to say that he was an uncompassionate person, that's not the case. And he was even a funny person if you understood his sense of humor. But being a child, I had no idea. I tell this story often too, and this is just to give you an idea of the kind of person we're dealing with. I went to Catholic school at a time where they didn't teach sexual education in school, which made puberty a surprise for a lot of us. It seriously felt like God was just walking around smiting us with pubic hair, like just pimples, boners, take it. And we're all like, what's happening to us? We don't know, and nobody would tell us. And so we're all walking around with like zombies with boners, and it was just terrible. It was not a good scene. And I remember being very frustrated because I was constantly being told, school is where you go to ask the question, they will give you answers. And I kept asking the question, but the buck kept getting passed down the line until eventually I ended up in the nurse's office. And just to explain what happened to me, my voice didn't change like it does for a lot of people over the period of a couple months. I was talking like this, and all of a sudden I started talking like this. And if that happens to you in a Catholic school, their go-to is, oh, he's clearly possessed. I mean, obviously. Listen to his voice, you can tell. And that's what I was dealing with. And I remember finally getting to the nurse's office, and the nurse said to me, you need to talk to your dad about this. And I was like, I don't have a dad. And she was like, find the nearest man. Awesome advice. And I remember trudging home in the snow, not at all relishing that I had to talk to my granddad about this. And just to give you a visual of my granddad, all of this is newspaper, and all he ever really saw were the sides of his hands. And that was his kind of force field to bounce the world's shit away from him. Jewelry? Mow the lawn? No. Like, that's just how he dealt with everything. And I remember finally working up the courage and just being like, all right, look, I'm going through all these changes and I just need someone to level with me. And I remember he folded up his newspaper and he put it in his lap and he looked at me and he said, maybe you're turning into a monster, ever think of that? And that was it. No, like, oh, I'm just kidding. Like, just that. And you would just walk away like, no, I can't. And it was horrifying because I'd just seen Teen Wolf and I was like, no, I can't handle it. I don't have the constitution to deal with this problem. And yeah, so that's just kind of who he was. And my granddad used to read to me before bed. Sounds awesome, right? If you were prepared for the kind of shit he was going to throw at you. Being very young and having him read Lord of the Rings to me, that sounds cool if you're ready for it. Not ready for it at all. And he would always leave it off in the worst possible moment, like something terrible is about to happen, or somebody just got squashed, or whatever it was, and then he'd be like, oh, good night. And so I grew up with night terrors. He's probably the reason I had them. But he helped me through it. He helped me deal with that issue. And so I thought we'd start the show with this piece. You guys good? You ready for some poetry penetration? Let me put my poems in you. It's gonna be a good one. The three things you need to know about my granddad are: number one, and probably most important, he had an intense love for beef jerky. 2, he had the kind of bad temper that could be likened to a levee bursting apart on a hot, dry day. A cachet of anger stored away for any given moment on any given day. My grandmother used to say he was one half volcano and one half hurricane, a handful of excuses and a gut full of pain. And because of this, we come to number 3. My granddad had a way with monsters. As a child, I slept in a bedroom full of them. A closet stuffed with long-legged demons who could make it from one end of the room to the other in a single step. My strep throat silence was born from night terrors. When screaming was not enough, so I instead kicked the wall, drew my first remembered breath the moment I heard thunder storm down the hall, then burst through my door like a war on its way to a peace protest. My granddad would rest his hands on his hips, let his fingertips grip his boxers and lift them up past his waist. Standing like a superhero in the doorway, he would split the night with a whisper and say, "All right, you motherfuckers. I swear to Christ, I will turn on a goddamn light." Never has any monster ever heard a battle cry more terrifying than "I will turn on a light." And every night for more than 4 years, my granddad took boogeymen by the ears and threw them out on their asses. Dragged the carcasses of dead monsters out of my room, grabbed a broom and swept what was left of my nightmares into a dustpan, emptied them to a trash can, then turned around to say, "Sweet dreams, my boy. I'll be down the hall if you need me." We were sidekicks. I'd sound the alert, and my granddad would put the hurt on whatever was hiding under my bed or lurking in my closet. He'd deposit his foot so deep into the asses of gargoyles that when they finally turned back into stone, he could wear them as platform boots to a Kiss concert. My granddad used to wear a red polo shirt to bed. He said it used to be white. But one night when I was 4, he busted down my bedroom door and I had to kick some ass because I was screaming. Now he wears it as a warning, teaching nighttime. There are some things far worse than morning. A night terror differs from a nightmare in that the dreamer will awake and take terror with them back into consciousness. Add to this the fact that the dreamer rarely recalls what they dreamt and that any attempt to wake them usually ends unsuccessfully. I know this now, but think constantly how my granddad had to just stand there and wait for it to end. How the following day he'd pretend not to be tired. An alarm clock wired into fears I could not recall. He'd wake and thunder down the hall doing the very best he could. He'd be there. An anchor pulling me back from the somewhere I could not escape. As a child I learned not everyone gets a ticker tape parade just for having patience. Not everyone has the confidence needed to just stand there, wait for it to end, and believe everything is going to be okay. Not everyone has the strength to say or do nothing when a child is screaming, dreaming of eternity in a room with no doors, no floors to keep you from falling further into panic, each once small fear suddenly titanic in its implications, situations so far beyond grotesque, I would have amputated my own imagination just to make them stop. But at the end of each one, he'd be there. And he'd say, close your eyes. I'm going to turn on a light. He'd invite me back to consciousness with a tired smile. The next day, he would sit on the sofa before dinner and say, I just need to rest my eyes. My quest to end night terrors was born from the night he ended up falling asleep at the wheel and driving full speed into a snowbank. My one-man think tank kicked into overdrive, and for 5 nights in a row, my granddad slept soundly, free from worry. We watched the light return to his eyes as if it had just come back from some long vacation. But on night number 6, the kicks against the bedroom wall made thunder storm down the hall once more. He stood in the doorway ready to wage war, ready to restore light to darkness, to dismiss shadows, to land heavy-handed blows, Muhammad Ali combos who would give monsters pause to reconsider the options. Get up or stay down. Stay down. That night, he was hungry for a first-round knockout. He was about to go through his usual checklist of monster hiding spots when I said, no, it's okay. Go back to bed. With renewed enthusiasm, he looked at me and said, nonsense. These assholes have to pay. And I remember the way he dropped to his knees, stuck his head under my bed and said, what the fuck is all of my beef jerky doing under here? I explained to him my not-so-brilliant plan. I said, I thought if I kept them fed, they'd leave me alone and you could get a good night's sleep. Slow but deep, his lips crept across his face and cracked open into laughter. After a childhood of expecting only anger, he lay down on the ground, his lungs kicking at his chest, every suppressed joy suddenly brought to the surface. This is the first time I can recall hearing my granddad laugh. Some thoughts are kept in closets, hanging next to skeletons and boogeymen. Sometimes when we believe in monsters, they take up residence under our beds. Our heads fill with the dread needed to keep them fed. We tread our own fear because we somehow thought it was better off being kept secret. It should come as no surprise that some hearts are like dark bedrooms. Tombs that we allowed ourselves to shut because we thought that way everything would be all right. I think about my granddad's laugh. I think often about that night. About how some people are waiting for people like us to slide our hands against their walls and say, close your eyes. I'm going to turn on a light.